Hey everybody, Jack here, and I wanted to do a video that had a recap of some of the highlights of our Cosmic Encounter Invitational that we did this week. So it was a 7-player game. It was with very experienced players. Bill Eberly, original designer of Cosmic Encounter, was in the game. I was in the game. Greg Alaka, son of Peter, the original designer, was in the game. And then we had 4 other players, a couple of which playtesters on Odyssey and participants in our Cosmic Encounter Online tournament, and the creator of the PRA, which I'll put the link in the description. So it was a fantastic game. It was a long one. It was a little over 2 hours. I mean, we started a little after 7:30. There was a little bit of explaining of what was going on, what variants we were using, and et cetera, et cetera. But the gameplay, it didn't feel that long. But yeah, it was an interesting game. So let me tell you about, first I'll tell you what aliens we were using. So I was playing as Inferno, and that's an alien from Cosmic Odyssey. And it is basically the Vultch of Flares. A little bit more to it, though. So Inferno, after everyone has dealt their hands during setup, there's going to be 5 additional Inferno Flares to get shuffled into the deck. And that is because the Inferno Super is an alternate win condition that Inferno can get. If Inferno ever has 5 flares and 2 of them are Inferno Flares, they can win the game. So the way that Inferno works is after another player plays a flare and attempts to return it to their hand, Inferno takes that flare. And then there's a little clause that's similar to what Vultch does when they're drawing a new hand. You reveal any flares in your hand, set them aside, draw your new hand, and then you add the set-aside flares to your hand. And this was a game where people were very interested in drawing new hands, and I'll get to that here in a moment. So Inferno, it's a scary alien to play. It does tend to cause players to be very reluctant to play their flares because they know that they're probably only going to get one use out of it, and then Inferno is going to get that flare. So they not only don't want to give Inferno the flare, but they want to, if they're going to play that flare, they want to make sure that they're playing it for a really good effect and at the right time. And some flares did get played. So in particular, the Parasite flare got played, and that is a flare that lets you get a free foreign colony when somebody loses their alien power for having too few home colonies, which did happen, and I'll get to that a little bit more. So that was a flare that somebody was like, well, I'm definitely playing this because it's great, and who cares if Inferno gets it. The Inferno Wild is basically going to let you win an encounter because you play it, and if somebody else plays a flare, discards a flare, you're basically getting to add just an obscene number to your side's encounter totals. So the downside, of course, is Inferno is going to get that flare. So Bill, who was sitting to my left, clockwise for me, was playing the Might. So this was a Cosmic Encounter online alien that Bill was one of the designers for. And he said it was because it was fairly easy to program its effect. So this is a base game alien. It's the power to bluster. It's offense only. So an offense only alien in a 7-player game, you're only going to get to use it maybe a couple of times. And Bill did have 2 turns where he got to use, and he'd used it very effectively. So it's a powerful effect. So it's the power to bluster as the offense before allies are even invited. If the defense has more than 3 cards in their hand, then you mandatorily use this power. The defense must either discard down to 3 cards at random. And this was a game where some people had really big, absurd hands. They either have to discard randomly down to 3, so that can be, or they just give you a colony on the targeted planet, and if they agree to do that, then you just land there, and that's the encounter. So they're either going to proceed with the encounter with 3 random cards from their hand, and then discarding the rest of them. And at one point, Bill had the Might Super, which let him take the discarded cards. So he did use that, and then of course Inferno picked up that flare. So I ended the game with a lot of flares in hand, and I did try to win with the alternate win, but I got card zapped, so I lost one of my Inferno flares. And I knew that there was a good chance that was going to happen, but I felt it was worth the risk. And if nothing else, I wanted to get the card zap out of Bill's hand, because I felt like I had a decent chance of picking up another Inferno flare, which turned out not to be true. So, but Bill used Might very effectively, and there was a very tense exchange towards the end of the game, which I'll explain a little bit later. Going clockwise, Greg was in the next seat, and he was playing Parasite. So, classic alien, also in the base game. Also, almost gave Greg the win. Very close. Power to Infest, so unless specifically prevented by another game effect, namely the force field, when it is your turn to ally, you may use this power to ally with either side, even if you had not been invited. And nobody was really inviting Greg because they knew that he was just going to come along. So he was committing to encounters fairly early and risking a lot of ships, and ended up losing a lot of those ships, although he did pick up some foreign colonies. And it did get to the point where the offense, in many cases, towards the end, would be able to target a planet that Greg was already on. But that's not always easy. And in a 7-player game, it's easier for Parasite to avoid that kind of a fate. So he was very effective at using it. It was a good fit for him. Jordan chose the Loser, another base game alien, and one of the highest rated aliens because it is great at hand management. So the power of upset as a main player, before you select your encounter card, so after alliances, you may use this power to declare an upset. So when you do that, both main players must play attack cards if they have them. Then after the cards are revealed, the winning side actually loses and the losing side actually wins. And then it explains here, this occurs after all other game effects are resolved, such as the human's power of being zapped. And that is going to come into play because Maxwell was the human. So we had that in there. Human in a base game alien, Fantasy Flight Edition, the first appearance of it. Power of humanity. So as a main player ally, human's going to add 4 to that side's total. But also, if for any reason human gets cosmic zapped, then human automatically wins the encounter. So human got zapped quite a bit in that game. And on 2 occasions, it prevented the win. So somebody was going to win the game because they were going to beat human, and then somebody else used the zap to... so I cosmic zapped Maxwell at one point, and Bill used an Omni Zap as a cosmic zap to zap him at another case. Benji was playing the Mind, so another base game alien. So before allies are invited, you get to see the entire hand of one of the main players. And if you're a main player, it's your opponent's hand. So Benji had quite a bit of card knowledge about what people had, eventually able to parlay that into some wins. You're not allowed to tell any other players what cards you see in the player's hand using this power. So that creates some weird situations where people are like, what card should I play? And kind of try to dance around it. And then finally, Jumbo was playing Warpish. So the only red alert alien in this particular game. Also in the base game. Power of Necromancy as a main player. After you reveal an attack card in an encounter, use this power to add 1 to your total for each ship, yours or otherwise, in the warp. And as you can imagine, in a 7-player game, it does not take long for Warpish to become very powerful. And indeed, he was very powerful. So what was really interesting about this game, so at the beginning of the game, I felt a little bit picked on. People were not inviting me. They were targeting me for effects and going after me. And that's to be expected, I suppose. So I was very behind in the colony count for quite a while. Greg, of course, got to 4 colonies, the fastest. But then slowly, one by one, everybody else was getting to 4 colonies as well. But this was an interesting game because ships were at a premium. That is because we were also using evolutions. So I had my custom evolution mat in digital form on there, and we were using some of my custom evolutions were in there as well. So we did have at least one. So let's look at what the 4 evolutions. And the way it works, of course, is at the start of every encounter during the regroup phase, similar to how you can research a technology with one of your ships. You can take one of your ships from one of your colonies and you can place it next to one of these evolution cards and start to evolve something. Now, there's basically 2 types of evolutions. One of them is a new effect that you're going to be able to get once you have committed a certain number of ships and hit a minimum threshold. So like, oh, now you have this new effect that you can apply. And sometimes if you have even more ships to that, the effect becomes amplified. The other type of evolution is basically some game function or mechanism that normally everybody can do and we take for granted, but when certain evolutions are in play, you actually can't do those things at the beginning of the game till you have evolved enough to be able to do it, and that requires the commitment of ships. And then similar to the previous type, after you've hit a threshold that turns that effect back on, there's often an enhanced version of that effect when you have committed more ships. So you can put one ship on an evolution at the start of each encounter, or you can move a ship that you have on an evolution to a different one. Now, these ships, unlike technology, they're not stuck there. So it's at some point where you're like, I need more ships. You can just pull ships off of the evolutions, but you will devolve accordingly. So we had coordination tactics. So this is one where it's invite allies. So at the start of the game, you cannot invite allies. We have 0 ships by this evolution. Now, once you have 1 ship, you can invite 1 ally. And what was interesting is that for a lot of the game, a number of players, myself included, but Greg as well, and Bill, and they only had 1 ship on there, and they could only invite 1 ally. 1 ship lets you invite 1 ally. And in a game with 7 players, there's opportunities where, like, I want to be able to invite a lot of people, and I really was expecting people to commit heavily to that, especially towards the end of the game where you felt like, all right, somebody's going to go for the win. I want to be able to invite everybody to stop them. Now, as long as you have 2 or 3 ships on this evolution, you have no restrictions. So you can invite as many players as you want normally. If you have 4, though, on this evolution, after encounter cards are revealed, your allies can send additional ships up to their ship limit. So if they'd only sent 1 or 2 ships, they could bring in more ships up to the normal limit, which is typically 4, so that it's almost like reinforcements. Nobody really ever got up to 4. I think people were much more interested in some of these other evolutions, so that was not a factor. And like I said, through a lot of the game, when people were, especially when they're like, I'm short on ships, which didn't take long for that to happen either. They were taking away from the coordination tactics. And at one point, Greg had no ships on there. So he was like, well, I can ally. I don't need to invite other people. And he definitely tried to work that. The next one up is called Archival Studies, and it lets you keep non-encounter cards. So there's no restrictions. Or you're not losing an ability. This is one of the new effects. So it lets you keep non-encounter cards. So when you have 2 ships on this evolution, before you draw a new hand, you may reveal up to 2 non-encounter cards from your hand and include those as part of your new hand. So you would only draw 6 cards if you were keeping 2 non-encounter cards. And at one point, the Mind had done that. They had 3 non-encounter cards left. So they're trying to figure out, do I keep the Mobius tubes, which I'm really shocked. While they did keep it, they didn't play it, and would have really weakened Dwarfish at that point in the game because they were pretty powerful. They were adding almost 20 to their totals. So, but yeah, so they kept that card but didn't play it, and you could only play Mobius tubes as the offense. So once their turn was over, that was it. We were not going to see that Mobius tubes, and in fact, we didn't. And if you have 3 ships before you draw a new hand, you may reveal any number of non-encounter cards. So this was, it could have been a much bigger factor, especially when you consider the last one in this list. So I'll bring this one back here to explain it. We did have Turbo Cannon. Again, it's another new effect. It adds to your total. So as soon as you have 2 ships on here, you're going to add the number of your ships on this evolution to your side's total. So you can keep adding more and add more. And at one point, Greg, I think, had 5 ships on there. So he was adding 5. And of course, with loser in the game, we cautioned him about, if you get into a battle, this is mandatory. So you have to add those ships. And there's no way to zap these effects. Not even an Omni-Zap can zap an evolution, because it can only zap a card that has been played or revealed. And it's too late by the time you start the game. So he was like, I'm not going to fight the loser. And of course, he ended up battling the loser and not winning. So that was interesting. But then we had a new one, and it's warehousing. So this is drawing a full hand. So this is one of the ones that gives you a little bit of a handicap. You're going to start with a normal size hand at the beginning of the game. But when you're drawing a new hand, if you have 0 ships here, you're only going to draw 5 cards. So that is definitely a restriction. With 1, 2, and 3 ships here, you draw a normal 8-card hand. When you get to 4 or more ships, when you're drawing a new hand, you draw your 8 cards, and then 1 for each of your ships on this evolution. And that is where things got crazy. I believe it was Maxwell that first was able to draw a new hand, and he had 6 ships on here. So he was drawing the 8 and then drawing the 6. And then the Mind did the same thing, where Benji, he used the archival studies to keep 2 of his cards, and then he got 6. And then he too had 6 ships on warehousing, so he drew it. So that was 2 very large hands. Very crazy, but I love that. I was so close to getting a new hand, and then I drew rewards, and that was my mistake. I should have avoided it. And in terms of rewards, we were using my Defender reward. So you'll notice that this is not the normal back. Normal rewards are very dark blue, almost an indigo color. And of course, the Ultra rewards are red. We were not using either of those. We were using these. And it's a mix of it's basically all of the Cosmic Odyssey reward cards, but some extras in there. So, but the trick with these is you can only get them if an effect says Defender reward. So if you had any effect that says you can gain a reward, this was not eligible for that. You could draw cards from the Cosmic deck or get ships out of the warp, as you can with normal rewards. But you could only get these if an effect specified Defender rewards, which I don't think we had any in our game, but also as a successful defensive ally. So we did get through most of that deck at some point. So people had a number of those. There were safeguards in there. There were kickers in there, and some other interesting effects. The Omni-Zap, for example. So yeah, it was a crazy game. At one point, Bill was at 4 colonies, and he was going for the win, and he got a wild destiny, so he could go wherever he wanted. And Jordan kept trying to say, "Look, come join, come to my system, attack me. We can make a deal." But Jordan didn't have a hand. He was the loser, and he was assuming, well, I'll draw a negotiate card. It'll be no problem. I'll be able to negotiate and get that deal. So he drew his new hand, and he insisted that he did have a negotiate. But then Bill said, "I'm going to bluster you." Well, he had to. He had to either say, "Look, you give me the colony," or you discard down. So they did the discard. It was to random. And somehow Jordan ended up getting a negotiate again. But somebody had to quash. So that deal got quashed. And that really led to the victory of the game. So a spoiler alert, and you can watch through. I invite you to watch the stream, and the link is in the description as well. But I won that game, and it was with the Parasite Flare, because before that encounter, I had gone for the win on my turn, and it was against Jordan, and it looked like he was trying to figure out, all right, yeah, I think he had actually drawn the new hand before my encounter, so not before Bill's. So he knew he had to negotiate. So yeah, what had happened was he was trying to figure out if he should expect to declare an upset and go for a low total, or go big. But because he didn't have a hand, he was going to have to decide whether or not to invite allies before he drew the hand. So he was going to have to hope that he was going to draw some good cards reasonably good cards, but he was going to have a lot of allies. And so I had an attack 0, so I felt pretty good that I could win if an upset was declared, as long as he, had at least one attack card. But he made the right decision to go for the, invite everybody. So people sent a bunch of ships. It was my highest card, I think, was an 8, so it was not going to work out for me. But I did have the antimatter flare, which meant that before we even selected our cards, I could just declare that both sides win. So that played into my backup plan. Because of the evolutions, everybody was very low on ships. And because the Mobius tubes didn't get played, there were a lot of ships in the warp. There were a lot of ships on the evolutions. People had their foreign colonies. They were trying to keep their home colonies. Greg had lost his power as the parasite. And there were a number of people who were close to losing theirs. So I figured it's only a matter of time before somebody else does lose their alien power, and I can just play that parasite flare and win. So I played the animated flare. Everybody both lost. I lost 2 ships, but a lot of the other players lost 4 ships. And no rewards. They didn't get anything because, of course, they lost. So what happened was Bill was very low on ships. And so when he did attack Jordan and they tried to make a deal and it was quashed, he had to lose 3 ships because of a failed deal. And he ended up pulling ships off of 2 of his home colonies. And he only had 4 home colonies at that point. So he was like, well, my turn is over. It's going to be 7 turns before I go again because the might is offense only. So what do I care if I lose my alien power? So he stripped it out. He's like, I'm going to lose my alien power. He pulled the ships off and bam, I played that parasite flare. Now everyone else was going to try to be like, no, don't do it. Take that back because, we should be able to advise you to, he could have taken ships off of the evolution, which is totally fair. But it was getting late. And so I said, let's just call it a day there, and we'll just give me the win. So was it a dirty win? Yes, it was. Yes, it was. But I'm still going to count it as a win for me. 7P solo win. That's pretty good. But yeah, no, I felt dirty about it. But I was like, nah, the game has gone on long enough. So so yeah, we did ended up there. They did try to argue like, well, not everybody knew you had the flare, but if you were paying attention, you knew that the flare had been played, and that you knew that I took that flare because I said I'm taking that and putting it into my hand because I'm waiting to see if somebody's going to cosmic zap me or whatever, and nobody did. So, yeah, so that was how that game ended up. It was a lot of fun though. So even with the dirty win at the end, it was a very enjoyable game. A lot of twists and turns. Everybody got up to 4 colonies. A number of people went for it. Warpish went for it. Attacking Human would have won, except that I cosmic zapped him. And yeah, just a lot of fun. Evolutions, one of my favorite variants now with Cosmic Encounter, because it really does make those ships so much more important. Everybody takes ships for granted. That's one resource, cards are the other. Everybody prefers cards. And even with evolutions, you still tend to prefer cards, but it makes you think. And that mix of those 4 can make some really interesting, different, dynamic environments for Cosmic Encounters. So I love it. It's one of the variants in Cosmic Odyssey, so pick that up. I think it's a great expansion. I'm biased, but I think it's great because it really is 3 expansions in one. Even if you don't have any interest in the campaign, although I love the campaign for me. I love that it helps you figure out what should we play, what should we use, and then there's certain different incentives, and it makes you play differently because you're scoring things differently. So that's what I love about the campaign. And it's got all the little fun things, the wrench cards and the envoys and all that other stuff. But even if you're not even using all of that, you got all these other variants in there. So you get the moons, and you get the Lux, and you get the evolutions, and that's all great, all those new variants. But even if that's not what interests you, you got all the expansion of the others. So the new hazards, the new technology, and not just new, but new types. And so whatever. I've done plenty of videos where I talk about that. If you watch the stream, let me know what you thought of it. And take a look. The audio is it's not the greatest. But it's fine. You can sit through. It's a long game though, so maybe you'll scroll through and and find some choice moments. But it was a lot of fun. Our next Invitational will be in November, third week of November, that Tuesday night. We're going to be using Lux, so that is what you can look forward to in that one. That's it for this video. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you again soon.